You can actually measure how far down the road Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has travelled in creating the conditions for a regional war in the speeches of Hassan Nasrallah. 10 months ago, the leader of Hezbollah took a full month to react to Hamas's attack on October the 7th. And even then, he was too circumspect for Hamas's comfort. Nasrallah said Hamas's operation was 100% Palestinian in operation and execution and had no bearing on any decision or move to be taken by any other faction within the resistance axis. Since then, more than 36 senior Hezbollah commanders and some 400 fighters have been killed, largely from two units, its southern front and the Radwan unit, Hezbollah's special forces. But this week, Nasrallah's tone changed markedly. Speaking at the funeral of his deputy Fuad Shukr and after the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas's political bureau, in a bomb in Tehran, Nasrallah said, "To the Israeli army, laugh a little now, but you'll cry a lot as you don't know what red lines you've crossed. Israel," he said, "will not know where Iran's attack will come from. We've moved beyond just a support front. This is an open battle on all fronts, a new phase." The new phase he's talking about is a war on 5 fronts, from the Houthis in the south, Hamas in the east, Hezbollah in the north, Iran and Jordan in the east. Nasrallah is not bluffing, and America knows it. Joe Biden has lost control of Netanyahu and has even less control over preventing or mitigating a regional war. But certain things must be clear even to him. If Netanyahu had any intention of signing a ceasefire deal, he would not have killed Hamas's chief negotiator, nor would he have vowed to keep the Israeli forces in Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor. I don't buy the notion that Netanyahu is in the grip of the Messianic right. Long before Itamar Ben-Gvir surfaced as a political force, Netanyahu made the crushing of the Palestinian national cause his life's work. Today he might think he's on the cusp of his ultimate political achievement as Israel's longest serving prime minister by dragging the US into a war with Iran. Attacking Iran is by far the most important calculation in Netanyahu's brain, and it's frightening the life out of his generals. From a strategic point of view, Israel's action in killing Haniyeh is madness. This is not my judgment alone, but that used by former Israeli General Amiran Levan, who said that the security forces should have strongly opposed the move. If the Israeli military will not be able to defeat or disable Hamas in Gaza, Israel will need people in Hamas to negotiate with, and they've just killed one of them. Even without a ceasefire, Haniyeh was worth more to Israel alive than dead. Israel could have plausibly argued to a Western audience that it would not surrender Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, while another of those named in the ICC's application for arrest warrants, Haniyeh, was free to live in Qatar. Pressure would have inevitably been applied on Qatar to surrender him and expel the political bureau of Hamas. Now that he's out of the equation, Israel has lost that defense. All this Israel has achieved in killing Haniyeh. What Netanyahu can be sure he has not done is to weaken Hamas. Quite the contrary. Haniyeh, a modest man who lost 60 members of his family, including sons and grandsons, to Israel in this war, will go down as one of Hamas's greatest martyrs. Israel has killed countless Hamas leaders and commanders, and the movement has only grown in recruits, weaponry and political influence. Today, all polls show that Hamas would win in the West Bank if free elections were allowed to take place there. The Hamas that has resisted Israel's attack on Gaza for 10 months is many times the size and capability of the Hamas in the days of its founder, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. The quadriplegic founder of Hamas was killed when an Israeli helicopter gunship fired a missile at him as he was being wheeled from Fajr prayers in Gaza. Haniyeh was his chief of staff. But it is also no coincidence that Netanyahu is so intent on setting fire to the region when he has a real fire raging at home. That came when a fascist mob broke into an Israeli military detention center in an attempt to stop 9 soldiers accused of raping a Palestinian detainee from being arrested. Among the mob were reservist soldiers and 2 parliamentarians, one of them a minister. Police took 3 hours to arrive, Herzi Halevi, the army's chief of general staff, had to break off a defense meeting on Israel's response to the recent attack on the Golan Heights to deal with this crisis. The army and the police force each blamed each other for the breakdown in law and order. For a time, the accused soldiers barricaded themselves into Sder Timan, the detention base, and used pepper spray to defend themselves against arrest, before eventually being taken into custody. Israel portrays itself to the outside world as the one functioning state in a neighbourhood of failed ones. You don't have to build a state in Israel, Netanyahu once bragged to US politicians before Congress. We're already built, but that state is showing distinct signs of failing too. Napoleon and Hitler were at the height of their powers, and their respective armies had tamed Europe under their jackboots when each dictator thought it was a good idea to attack Russia. So too is Netanyahu endangering everything Israel has achieved by openly creating the conditions for a regional war and thinking that he could win. The Israeli military know the truth, that killing Haniyeh was the last thing they should be doing if they want to see any of their hostages back alive. They know how well armed the axis of resistance now is and how effective their rockets and drones are. They can feel the vulnerability of Israel's population and economy to a war on 5 fronts simultaneously. Netanyahu is making the classic mistake of overreach in the messianic belief that Jews really are God's chosen people, that the Bible ordained all of this, and that Israel can achieve its goal of complete military victory now. It's precisely at this moment that it is at its most vulnerable and that the whole project could collapse. For nothing other than self-preservation, those who understand this in Israel should act before Netanyahu involves them in a war they can't possibly stop, still less win.